Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to our preliminary oral defense for Sara Bruce. Sara, we're so pleased and proud of you to get to this point, and we're excited to hear your proposal. So the way this will kind of work is we'll put your slideshow up, and
here's Dr. Olson Stewart. Let's just say hi to her real quick while we're getting started here. Hi, Kelly. Yay.
Hi, Sara. Thank you for letting me be here. It's an honor, and I'm sorry I'm coming in hot. I just had another meeting that ran long.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay, go ahead, Jody.
So yeah, you'll take about 20-25 minutes to present your slides, and then we'll just go through on the team and just see if anyone has any questions, and you would answer those questions. And then Alan, Michelle, and I will pop into a breakout room, and we'll come back and we'll let you know if we have any questions or concerns. And like Michelle had said, Dr. Warren had said last time, our job is to help you succeed. And so we believe for that result at the end of this. So we're excited to hear about your study. And did you get the slides?
Yeah, shall I go ahead and put them up?
Sure.
Okay, here we go.
And then without further ado, Sara, once they're up, you can begin.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any questions?
I don't. No, thank you. Okay. That was all straightforward.
Okay, hang on. There we go. Wait a minute. That's annoying. I guess it has to do it that way. Okay. All right. Can you all see the slides okay?
Yes, right. I can.
Great. Okay. Take it away, Sara.
Okay. Well, first of all, just thank you everybody for coming today to listen to my presentation. The title of my presentation and hopefully my research is Effective Strategies and Methods for Teaching K-12 Special Education Students Online. Next slide. So introduction, a brief introduction. So I currently work in the school district system as a behavior analyst. My job is to work with those special education students that have different disabilities to decrease any maladaptive behaviors inside the classroom, so that way they have more opportunities to learn their academics. So when students pivoted to the online modality, there was a huge learning curve in classroom expectations and skill requirements for these students. When I looked at the literature on this topic, I realized there was a good amount of research on general education students, but there was limited research on special education students. And so because of the limited research, I would like to explore this topic more and do this research. Next slide, thank you. So just a brief background about the research. So COVID-19 pandemic caused a nationwide shutdown. This included mandates to close traditional schools at all education levels. This forced students to pivot to remote learning. Both teachers and students were asked to do this. So teachers had to quickly transition with little to no resources available for them to utilize in the classroom, which leads us to the next slide, please. The problem statement. So teachers had to prepare and administer classes at home with support or without the support of teaching and learning in the online environment. So special education teachers had to teach the special ed students online without training on best practices for them. This included supporting students with technology and supporting students through caregivers. Students in the special education system often receive additional support from a one-to-one that's referred to as either a teacher's aide or a paraprofessional. When we moved to the online modality, caregivers then had to be that support for students at home, which left a lot of special education teachers trying to coach caregivers through this online environment or online modality. So the purpose of my study is to investigate the challenge teachers face when teaching in the online environment, to investigate strategies and resources special education teachers effectively used, to investigate training that best prepared special education teachers when they transition to the online environment, to provide information for special education teachers and administrators when transitioning to the online environment. That way this can add any methods and strategies to their toolbox. And so that way teachers spend less time researching these things and more time teaching. Thank you. Oh, is it the other way maybe? Thank you. So the importance of this study is important because it can provide insight for educators about what did or didn't work when they transitioned to the online environment. It's important because it can help decrease any achievement gaps with special education students when they had to make that pivot to the distance learning. This study can also be used to inform administrators and educators about remote teaching. This research can also help create staff teacher development and possibly preparation courses for teaching in the online environment, and can also help aid in like additional educational experience for the special ed students. Thank you. So the theoretical framework, I wanted to discuss, and sorry, let me back up. I want to examine the theoretical framework to understand online learning. The first theory discussed is the equivalence theory. This states that the teaching and the learning experience can be the same, whether it's online or in a traditional classroom. In this theory, there are 5 main components. The first is the concepts of equivalence. This is when students in a traditional and online environment, even though they're in different learning settings, regardless of that setting, they can receive equal teaching. So it's the teacher's responsibility in the online environment to provide an instructional design that's equivalent to what they would receive in a traditional classroom. The second component is learning experiences. Students learning online affects what they learn. So students will learn at different times and may involve different learning strategies. The next is appropriate application. Students learning experiences that are suitable for their learning and their learning environment and also their abilities. This is really important for students in special education. Appropriate application can also include providing and learning like promptly and properly, regardless of the location. The next is students. Students should be involved in their instruction. So this can happen a couple different ways through activities or discussions in the classroom. The research says that the course should define the students, not the student's environment. And then lastly, we have outcomes. So learning outcomes in the course that are measurable, outcomes that are driven by data. This can be measured by the testing or quizzes on the content that was taught and learned. Next, we have the Holmberg theory. Theory of distant education addresses communication between teachers and learners in the distant learning environment. This theory suggests that communication involves conversations between the teacher and students, that empathy within teaching creates motivation and encourages participation among the students. Thank you. That distance education is justified through the support of individualized learning, using different conversational styles, empathy, and learning. Communication involves conversation, so the presentations of materials or lectures. Communication can also involve open conversations between teacher and students. Next slide, thank you. So Based off of everything, there was 3 main research questions developed. What are the challenges faced by special education teachers when rapidly transitioning from a traditional classroom environment to an online-only classroom during the COVID-19 pandemic? The second research question is, how do special education teachers describe what training best prepared them to teach effectively in an online classroom during the COVID pandemic period? And the third, how do special education teachers describe what strategies were used to help them teach effectively in an online classroom during the COVID-19 pandemic? So for the research design and methodology, decided that the study will use a qualitative case study design. The qualitative method is used to develop the data and understand people's encounters and behaviors and their interactions. The focus of this design is to look more closely at the meaning and the motivation. The study will also use a smaller sample size and obtain data through a semi-structured interview. Exploratory case study. This is a technique used to collect data more in depth about what is occurring, to explore outcomes that are not foreseeable and answer questions set to analyze interventions that are too obscure for surveys or experimental strategies. The qualitative exploratory case study will address the question of what training best prepared teachers for the online environment. So next is the participants. So participants in this study will be special education teachers that have obtained their degrees and teaching licenses. They will be teachers that have taught prior to the COVID-19 pandemic in a traditional classroom, and then also in the online environment during the COVID-19 pandemic. For this research, we will use a sample size of 8 to 12 participants, keeping it small to create a stronger relationship during those conversational structured interviews to be able to hopefully pull a more natural conversation. The recruitment style will be through social media, primarily Facebook. Currently, there are about 4 main Facebook groups that are dedicated to special education teachers, and each group has an estimate about 45,000 members inside of it. So for our data collection, like I mentioned before, I want to be able to use semi-structured interviews with these teachers. I think this allows open dialogue with the participants. Interview questions are intended to be more open-ended to facilitate that conversation. These interviews will most likely occur over Zoom or in person, depending on the availability. They will be audio recorded. Let's see, sorry, data analysis. So for this, I will use a thematic analysis method for analyzing data and the patterns. So there's a couple different steps to this type of data analysis. The first step is transcribing the data. So that will go from the audio recordings to more textual documentation. The next is coding. So grouping similar things together. So this could be sentences or phrases that the participants are using during the interview. The next step is to find themes or patterns. So the key phrases can be placed in that thematic map to analyze for further themes. This process just will keep going on and on. The next step will be checking it, checking the themes that were found to determine if they accurately represent the data from the interviews. After that, definitions of the themes will define the themes and interpret it. And then lastly, it will be documenting all the results, all the data being and findings being concise and logical with the evidence that was found from the data. A few limitations of this study. The first is that it's limited to the United States. Another limitation is the small sample size. This research is limited to the knowledge and information provided by the participants. Another limitation is that the special education teachers that choose to participate are limited to the questions that they're asked, even though there may be more additional information on this topic. Delimitations are that only special education teachers will be asked to participate, although the problem of teacher preparedness in an online classroom spans all teachers and learning levels during that time. This study focuses just on on one specific population of teachers. Another delimitation of the study is that the study focuses on special education teachers in a specific region. Just a summary of everything I kind of discussed today. The COVID-19 pandemic forced teachers and students to move rapidly into a different type of learning modality. Teachers had little time to prepare classes accessible to special education students online. Teachers had limited time to learn the technology, create materials, and remove any possible barriers to learning for their students. This research will focus on challenges faced by special education teachers when rapidly transitioning to the online environment, what the strategies that best prepared special education teachers to teach effectively, and training that best prepared them to teach effectively. The results of this study will inform special education teachers on how to teach in the online environment. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions?
Okay, Dr. Warren, would you like to go first?
Actually, I'd like to defer to Dr. Belcher, and I will follow up after that.
Well, thank you so much. Nothing like being on the hot seat. So nice job. Very organized, very professional presentation. Thank you for that. A couple of questions for you. First, I think you said that you are a behavior analyst, right?
Correct.
Okay, so does that involve, are you doing testing to identify students, or are you working with students that are already identified as having a special need?
I work with students that already have a diagnosis.
Okay. Okay. Do you see, are you thinking about focusing on one exceptionality? Or are you looking at multi-categorical classrooms, or what do you think about that?
I wasn't looking at one specific category. I was just looking, I wasn't actually. I was just looking at a span of just different grade levels that would be different disabilities and severities.
Okay. I wonder if, for instance, teachers that are working with students that are maybe multi-categorical or mentally impaired are different from those that are working with students with visual impairments or other health impairments. I don't know the answer to that. I just wonder if that might, if narrowing down your categories might make it a little bit easier for you to focus on a subset of all that. Do you have any thoughts about that?
That's not a bad idea. That I hadn't considered that. That's makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. That I think that makes sense, because it potentially could give different tools to different teachers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the couple of theories that you mentioned in your conceptual framework, are those some that you've relied on? Well, not, there's the one that's more about distance ed, but the others, are those ones that you've kind of had in the back of your mind as you've done your work in the past, or are there other theories that more relate to what you've been doing professionally?
No, I think they kind of they've been relatable in the classroom, especially when we talk about like conversations and that rapport building part of it. You know, a lot of our SPED students, that's how we start with learning, is those conversations and that rapport building.
Okay. So you've had some online classes yourself, yes, as a student?
As a student, yes.
Yeah, okay. Do you think those theories are being applied in the classrooms that you've been a student in, the online classrooms?
I think some of them have, some of the components have possibly.
Okay, kind of instructor by instructor or as a general rule? Just curious, you know, the level of experience that you've had with those theories in action, I think will help, may also interfere just a little bit. So it's one of those things, you know, when you're doing this kind of research and looking for themes, you want to make sure that you can step outside of your own experience and focus just on what the people are telling you and not try to make that fit your mold of thinking, but just, you know, something else to throw out there.
Okay.
And with that, then I'll shut up for a little bit.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Belcher. Really, I knew there was a reason I waited to go after you. So again, a very professional presentation, Sarah. Thank you so much. I just love when there's bullets and people don't just sit and read what's on the screen. So thank you so much. I want to follow up with a couple of comments from Dr. Belcher, which I think were really helpful, right? Kind of opened up our mind a little bit about the methodology. And so perhaps as you conduct your research, in your questions, you might even ask about the types of disabilities in your interview questions and ask if there are differences in the way that they work with students in a learner-centered way, depending on the disability. So that would be really helpful to weave that into your interview questions. Also could be something that would be a recommendation in your chapter 5 for future research. So thank you so much for that, Dr. Belcher. I thought that Dr. Belcher had a really good point about withholding bias because of your own online experiences. And I think that we discussed reflexivity and kind of reflective, the ability to use journaling to stand back and withhold your own biases and assumptions from the study. And Dr. Jody and I can work with you on that to help you do that as you conduct your research with the students. I think your questions really give you a good big picture of what happened during that environment. And I think because you're focusing on COVID-19, you're going to have to really reel them in as they talk about the after those years. Right. So you want to be very specific about the years that they're working on, that they're referring to, and not have them kind of drift into the present day where they're probably much better and much more sophisticated in their work. Yeah. So that's everything for me. So I'll sit back.
If I'm looking down, I'm writing notes that you guys just so you guys know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Hi, Kelly, would you like to go next?
Yes. Thank you. So Sarah, this is a fascinating study. I think it is a niche. You found that gap of the literature. You referenced that specific around special ed. So one thing I thought about when Dr. Belcher was speaking is that I wonder if there's a way that you could at least capture the specificities of the special ed experience. So I was thinking my sister-in-law is a teacher of the hearing impaired. She's an itinerant teacher, right? So she jumps to all the schools to see the kids, and her experience versus a friend who is working with mild disabilities kiddos was vastly different, because it's really hard to do hearing impaired on Zoom. And so if you could capture that, because then you could tease out the data to say, you could put them in sort of buckets to see if there's differences in their experiences based on who the students were that they were working with. Because if you get too narrow in your population of recruiting, you might not get enough people. It would be better for you to have more people, I think, and still be able to tease out the data. So just like a demographic sort of section is what I'm anticipating.
Okay.
One thing I was curious about is how, and Dr. Warren sort of alluded to it, but how do you make this relevant for now? So what are you anticipating about? You're talking about a historical event. A lot has happened moving forward. How do you connect this to the fact that most classrooms are back in person, although knock on wood, I don't know if with the new variant, if we'll shift back again. But how do you make this present and relevant for today?
I think that switching to online will always be relevant for a lot of our special ed population, especially since there also comes different medical components that are typical with this population. So instead of missing out on those big gaps of school during different medical needs, where maybe they have to stay home due to different medical issues that they may have, it's being able to present this as a different option for them. So, you know, we're shortening that time that they're not learning.
That's great. One thing I was thinking about with the theoretical framework that you might consider as well for the post-study and for your final oral defense is creating a visual that shows kind of how you're using those theories together to explain or to respond to your research questions. You know, the idea of it being a framework for your study it's a strategy to help you see how the theories apply to your research as well. Because the other thing I was thinking about is like a resiliency theory, motivation theory, like some of those two. And I'm not necessarily suggesting you have to add an additional theory, but I think when you lay them out visually, it may be a helpful addition to your study.
Okay.
One other question I had was around what surprised you in the literature? What were you not anticipating that you did find?
It was more specific to the general ed students, but I was more surprised how effective it was for them, even the quick pivot, the different technology that was used. I think there's a lot of technology that can be used. I was surprised that there were so many different options out there, but at the same time that they weren't specific or they weren't able to change for our special ed students. They were just, you know, I don't know how to explain it very well right now, but when you go online to these discussion boards, they're not as friendly for our special ed students. And with all the technology that we have out there, I think I was more surprised that there wasn't more user-friendly options for all the different, you know, different disabilities and the severities that we have of disabilities.
Right. Thank you. Thanks.
I'd like to follow up with a couple of things from Kelly. Thank you so much, Kelly. That kind of stirs up a couple of things for me. And let's hold that thought, Sarah, as you move into your study. The surprising difference in the experiences of the two student populations, in that typical students were able to use technology more fluidly, more easily, and perhaps that was a concern with the special ed kids. So that's really something I think to really highlight. And then to all of the faculty in the room, kind of bringing up the thoughts about the different disabilities. I know her population, or her participant population, is a very small pool. Is it useful to look for some variety in the population when she's doing her screening? Or is that, what do you think? Maybe Dr. Belcher, you could kind of respond to that first.
Well, my only thought is that Yeah, I think it would be helpful to know what category of students the participants are working with. Because, and not that it, I don't know that it's necessary to focus only on one exceptionality
Mhm.
for this, but I think there is such a range and, you know, such a need, it would seem to me a different set of needs, just as there are within the classroom. The technology would have to be different
Mhm.
depending on the exceptionality. And I think that might make it more difficult to find usable themes if everything is spread out so far over multiple exceptionalities.
She might be surprised though that it doesn't really make that
It
much.
may not be right too.
But do you think she should add something to her screening questions as she's looking for participants? Should she look for a variety of backgrounds in the classroom? And can you do that in a screening questionnaire?
Oh, you could do that, but you know, what are you looking for? Like to find out if they have experience with.
I guess the difference would be developmental versus mobile impairments and other disabilities, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
I think it
So-
would be, sorry, I
Yeah. Go ahead, Kelly, please.
think it would be interesting
Yeah.
to ask on the screener and tease the data out to know whether you're talking about home, like these are kiddos that were on homebound instruction regardless of COVID, that this is a children's hospital special ed classroom teacher responding, that this is an autistic classroom teacher responding, that this is you know, like I think it would be interesting, but I don't think it would disqualify people who are special educators as an umbrella term. I
Right.
just think there are some nuances that would be helpful to tease out to know how vastly different some people's experiences may be based on the severity and complexity of the kids' needs.
And so then can you do this where she would be selecting from if she asks a few of those kinds of questions, can she in the back end after the screening select from her pool of candidates, this one's got different background experiences or different kids than this one does? Can she do that? Is that okay? Yeah. So then she would just need to state that she's searching for a variety of experiences in the classroom up front, right?
Right. And I think then in the screening, you know, you make it clear that, you know, if selected for participation, you know, you'll get the informed consent or do the
Okay,
informed
okay.
consent before that or whatever. But yeah, that you're looking for a particular type of
Okay.
teacher with set of experience or whatever. I think that's
Neat. Okay, that's cool.
very,
I didn't know
very
you
good.
could do that. That's super cool. Thank you.
So, putting in my 2 cents here, and I almost wish Sarah, so first of all, amazing presentation. You did a great job. I love your slide deck. Coming from the virtual world and working, I probably sit in on 2 to 3 IEPs a day in this season. And so I hear a lot. I also have 2 SPED teachers on my team of 20 teachers, so that I go into their SAI classes, I observe sometimes. And so there clearly in our virtual environment is a difference between students who have, let's say, a specific learning disability that can be included in the general ed learning environment online, and then those who are mod severe that need a pull-out type program or a special program. And in terms of, you know, on the specific learning disability side, they can use things like Google slide decks, ClassKick, Nearpod, Jamboards, you know, they can use all that. Whereas, you know, when you get someone who's not verbal, you know, they might need somebody to read for them, or they might need somebody to scribe for them. And so those involve different types of strategies. And so I was wondering, of course, all you guys get to go first, and but I was wondering if it wouldn't be better to categorize your teachers. So rather than having one SPED teacher who was a mod severe teacher, you know, to maybe really have 4, to just think about the SPED categories and then see if you could find 3 or 4 teachers in each category, because then there could be some comparison. Are they saying the same thing? And if
Okay.
they are, that gives that theme much more credibility and reliability to it.
Okay. I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. So we can, Dr. Warren and I can talk with you again about just the recruitment, you know. The second question I was going to ask is, how are you going to recruit? Because Facebook and social media is kind of broad in general. And so how have you thought about how you are going to recruit your participants on those sites?
So there are specific special educator groups. So it's just a matter of joining those and getting permission from the admin of those groups to post my flyer for the research, and then have participants reach out and fill out forms and go through that kind of process.
So then you could do something like an initial screening and screen for your categories that you want. So how many SPED categories do you think you would want to have, or would you want to have? Or again, are we back to just the general all in one?
Well, I haven't thought about doing categories until today, so I'm not quite sure. I do like the idea of doing the categories, even just splitting it up, mild, moderate, and severe. I really like that idea. And having a few teachers from each group, I think that would get it, like, paint a good picture for each category of strategies. Yeah, that gives me more to think about, but I do like having specifics or a certain number for each group.
Sarah, that makes a lot of sense to me, the mild, moderate, and severe, as opposed to that group compared to, you know, other health impairments or visual impairments or hearing impaired, because it just seems to me then that gets so, I don't know, complex. And I think the more categories that you end up with, can I say this politely, the more work you're going to have to do.
Yeah.
And so by narrow, I think your thought right there of mild, moderate, and severe would be really good.
You may, sorry, just this is like in the weeds a little bit, but you may have to have an other category because, for example, I'm just imagining if it was my sister-in-law, she wouldn't fall into any of those categories because of her population. So you may want to have like an other with a blank for them to fill in.
Okay.
How nice to have all these teachers and special ed teachers in the classroom with us. This is great. Very helpful. Nice.
All right. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, so we'll just
Have the room ready and I'll just invite you guys.
Thank you.
Dr. Belcher and Dr. Fernandez and I will step away for a second.
with
We'll
you.
be right back.
I'll be with you, Sarah, so you're not alone.
Okay, thank you.
she just adorable, you know.
Yes. Wait a minute. I don't know why the recording. Wait, hang on. I'm going to pause recording because I'm not sure what is going on. Okay.
Hey, did you want to go first, Dr. Warren?
No, Jody, you're the chair.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, this is the fun part, right? Well, first of all, Sarah, all 3 of us agree that you're absolutely ready to move forward, and so we want to congratulate you. And we're so excited to see what this study yields for you, the findings from it. And I think it's going to be a really fun journey for you. And congratulations on this moment. Take the day and celebrate. You know, you have now, isn't this the transition point where she becomes doctoral candidate, no longer a doctoral student? So that's a huge accomplishment. Yay. And then
I appreciate you guys so much. All your feedback and knowledge. Thank you so much.
yes,
It's our pleasure. You're just all over it and on top of it and fully clear about what you're doing in your next steps. Very proud of you. Good job.
yes. And you're a joy and delight to work with.
Mhm.
And yeah, so Dr. Warren and I will meet with you. Hopefully this week we can find a date that will work. We wanted to do Thursday at noon. I don't know if that will work for you. And go over next steps, getting your IRB summary ready. And then you'll go ahead and submit this proposal to DSIM for approval, okay?
Awesome. Okay. Yes. And yes, Thursday works. So that's great.
Great.
Okay,
Okay,
we'll
great.
set
Great.
that up for you. Okay.
Okay, and Dr. Olson Stewart said, put that doctoral candidate in your signature line. You are worthy of it. Okay.
Congratulations, Sarah. Thanks for letting me be here.
I appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you.
Congrats. Enjoy the day.
Thanks, Jody.
Bye.
Bye, Michelle. Bye,
Thank
Ellen.
you, everyone.
Bye.